So we want to get started investing in UK property, and you're currently sitting on about £1,000. Well, if I'm honest, you're not going to be buying that, are you? But there are things that you can do to get into property with just £1,000. And in this video, I want to explain what 3 of them are. Now, if you want to leverage your cash so it goes as far as it can in the world of property, I have a 3-step game plan that I think you should follow. If you watch to the end of this video and follow this 3-step plan, I'm certain that you'll be able to know which strategy or strategies will be best suited for your situation. But when I first got started in property, my property mentor sat me down in a table like this with 6 other people that were being mentored. And on day 1, he said to me, "How much money do you want to make in passive income?" And I was like, I don't know, I'm just finding all this stuff out for the first time. He's like, "Come on, how much, give me a number, how much do you want to make in passive income?" And I was like, £5,000. And he was like, "Amazing. Now what strategy are you going to use to get there?" Well, I don't know. I actually was hoping you could tell me. And he was like, no, this is your life, this is your business. You need to decide what strategy you want to go for. So which one are you going to do? And kind of like, I got to the point where I was sat around with these 6 other people, this mentor here, thinking I was going to come into a room, he was going to give me loads of advice, tell me all the different strategies available, and I was going to be able to make an informed decision. I just said any random strategy that I could think of. I don't even remember which one it was, because I was like, just want him to shut up and move on to the next person. But that was my experience of getting started in property. Now, I don't want that to happen to you. So that's why in this video, what I want to do is give you kind of a bit of a game plan and a rough idea of 3 strategies that you can use, that you can get started in with just £1,000. In order to do that, I want you to follow kind of a 3-step process before you jump into those strategies. The first step is learn all the different aspects of property, learn the different strategies. Now, that sounds really vague and it sounds like I'm slightly contradicting what I've just said in that there are so many strategies out there, okay, there's loads, whether they require £1 million to get started or whether they require £1,000 to get started. There's loads that you can do, from developments all the way down to the strategies that we're going to be talking about today. So you've got to work out what those strategies are, just get a base understanding, a base knowledge. You can do that through watching YouTube videos. I talk about loads of them on my YouTube videos. You can read books, you can listen to podcasts, go to networking events and meet people that are out there doing it. There are free ways for you to be able to find out what the different strategies are and what are available to you. Now, obviously, I'm going to reveal 3 that you can use with just £1,000 and how you can get started with those. But it's worth having a broader perspective and a broader idea of all the strategies that are available, because it will help you plan for the future. So that's step 1, you work out what the different strategies are that are available. And then step 2 is about dreaming. It's about planning, it's about setting goals. Before you can decide which strategy you want to use today, you want to know where you want to be in 10 years time, 20 years time. Think about the big picture, and I'm not talking about what necessarily, which strategy you want to be doing in 10 years time, because things change. Where do you want to be financially? Where do you want to be living? What kind of car do you want to be driving? Where do you picture your life in 10 years time? And then it's about working your way back from there. So then where do you want to be in 5 years time? Where do you want to be in a year's time? Where do you want to be in the next 3 months? Where do you want to be next month? Where do you want to be in a week from now? And then where do you want to be at the end of today? You just keep working your way backwards, and it will help you discover which strategy would be best for you. But genuinely, before you kind of decide which strategy to go down, just take a bit of time to think. I tried about 6 different property strategies before I landed on buying and selling houses, because I just didn't know what was available. So rather than learning about it, I just kind of found out about one, chased it for a few months, then found out about another, then chased it for a few months. You don't want to do that. You want to know what is available, you want to know what the options are, you want to know where you want to be in 10 years time, and then based off of that, work your way back to find out what works best for you today. And then step number 3 is make your decision. Actually decide which strategy you want to go for. Now, the 3 strategies that I'm going to talk to you about today all require up to £1,000, sometimes a little bit more depending on which deal you go for, but all 3 of them you can get started with just £1,000. Now, the first option is deal packaging. This is something that I do even now, even though I have more than £1,000 in the bank. It's such a great strategy for building up capital. Now, what is deal packaging? Deal packaging is where you play the middleman. You're like an estate agent, except you're representing an investor rather than a seller. You find a high quality property investment opportunity, you then find a serious buyer, you partner them together and you take a fee, usually from the buyer. This could be anywhere from £2,000, £4,000, £10,000, occasionally more, completely depends on the deal, but you're averagely looking about £2,000 to £5,000 for a standard property deal. Now, if you were going to watch this play out financially over the next year, as an example, you could find a deal per week, right? And if you can go out and you can secure one deal per week and you're averaging just the very absolute basic £2,000 per deal, you'd be making, at the end of this year, if you started today, in 12 months' time, you would have made £104,000 in the next year. £104,000 starting with just £1,000. It's really a pretty good return on investment, but it requires a lot of work and it's very active income. It's not passive income. And to be honest, none of these strategies I would describe as passive income. They're quite active and they're active businesses. So to give you an example, what we do, we find houses below market value. You don't have to go down that strategy, but that's something that we often do. So below market value, we secured a house, it was £85,000. We knew we needed to spend about £15,000 on it, and we knew it would sell for about £130,000. After all your legals, your stamp, everything like that, the person who bought this deal was going to walk away with about 25 grand. So out of that, we said, you know, as a fee for finding this, so that you don't have to do any of the legwork, you don't have to do any of the negotiation, we would like a £3,000 sourcing fee. And we sold it like that. And so that's how deal packaging works. We find the deal, we package it up, we pass it to an investor. They're the ones who go and buy it, they do the refurb, they sell it, they make all their money. But for doing that initial groundwork, we got £3,000. Now, what does that money go on? What does your £1,000 go on when it comes to setting up a deal packaging business? Well, the main thing is going to be your compliance. Like I said, it's very similar to an estate agent, and estate agents need to be compliant with the way that they operate. And it's exactly the same with deal packages. There's a bunch of different things, from anti-money laundering to different insurances that you need. The £1,000 will cover that. The second property strategy that I would recommend if you wanted to get started is option agreements. Now, people call these different things. You've got lease option agreements, you've got purchase lease options. Ultimately, it's an option contract, an option agreement. Now, when people throw the word lease in there, so whether it be purchase lease option or lease option agreements, what they're talking about is similar to a car, like a get it now but pay for it later type thing, and in the meantime pay a fee. So it might be that, as an example, you have a seller who is happy to just hand over the management of the property. You take over the management, you lease it from them, sometimes with a bit of money up front to kind of sweeten the deal for them, but you lease the property from them, you take in the rent, you make the profit, all that comes through to you, you deal with the management, you deal with the maintenance, and then after an agreed period of time, whether it be 3, 4, 5 years or more, you then agree from day one what your purchase price is going to be at the end of that agreement. So it might be that you agree £60,000 on a property, you then rent it out and make a couple £100 a month for the next 6 years, and at the end of that 6 years, you pay them the £60,000 for that property. Now, in that time, the property value may have gone up to £70,000, £80,000, £90,000, and you will also have benefited from the rental income. Now, that's very hard to do because there's just not many sellers that are willing to do something like that, but it is possible. The other thing that you can do is just a simple option contract. Ultimately, what an option contract is a contract that you sign as a buyer with a seller to say that the seller agrees to sell at X price. So again, using that example, if a seller was happy to sell at £60,000, you could sign a contract that says that they have the obligation to sell it, you have the option to buy it, and you have a certain time frame in which you can buy that. An example of how this could be profitable and how you could get started making really good money from this is I bought a house. I had an option contract with a seller down in Ipswich last year, and I agreed to buy it for £200,000. I got an option agreement signed, so it was legally secured. We fully locked it in at £200,000. I knew that house was worth about 280 to 300. So I went to an investor and said, look, I don't want to be forking out 200 grand for this property. It's not in my area. It's not for me. However, here's an opportunity. Would you buy this property for 225,000? And they were like, yes, please. I would love to buy it for 225,000. So I signed the contract to them and they paid me £25,000. So they paid me 25 grand to essentially assign that contract to them for 200,000. So ultimately, as a whole, that buyer bought that property for 225,000 pounds. They then stuck it on the market and sold it for 290 the next month. So they made a huge profit, I made a huge profit, the seller got the price they wanted. It was a win-win all round, but we were able to make a huge amount of money. I didn't have to fork out any money myself. I didn't have to do any of the renovation. I never had to send any cash across to anyone or anything like that. It was really, really simple. Well, not necessarily simple, but it was a lot easier than actually taking the property on myself and renovating it. Now with this one, the pretty obvious cost when it comes to getting started with working on option contracts is you're gonna be paying for the contract itself. You're gonna need to pay for that contract. That is, I mean, it's essential. You can't do options without the option. So you need the contract in place. That's where that cost is gonna come from. And then the second thing I would say that £1,000 needs to go on is, as much as possible, any kind of direct to vendor marketing. You can't really do an option agreement through agents unless they're dodgy agents. If you want to do an option contract with somebody, you have to do it direct to them. So you need to work out how to spend that money getting in front of motivated sellers that are willing to sign an option contract. Now, it might be difficult to do this, but if you're able to do 2 or 3 of those a year, you know, you're looking at 25 to 75,000 pounds. If you could do 2 or 3 of the types of deals that I managed to do, even if you just made 10 to 15 grand on each one, you're making 5 figures, multiple 5 figures, by not outlaying any capital yourself. So it's a really good way of finding good deals and making a really good amount of profit. Now the third and final one is quite commonly known, it's called rent to rent. I have looked into rent to rent a lot. I secured a couple of rent to rent deals a few years ago. Rent to rent is a really interesting strategy. It's essentially where you rent a property from a landlord, you would lease it on like a corporate let, corporate lease, and then you would rent it out in a different format to make even more money. So it might be that I rent a property from a landlord for £800, but then I rent it out on Airbnb on a nightly basis and I charge £80 per night, okay? And we rent it out for 20 nights and we get £1,600. So that's how it works. Make even more money, maximize the revenue that you're bringing in, and in exchange, you pay your landlord a guaranteed rent every single month. You take care of the management, you take care of the maintenance, things like that. Now, I know people that do this, and based off of the average kind of profit you're gonna make, let's assume it's gonna be a house or an apartment that you're renting out on Airbnb. The average profit margin that I know, you know, you have ups and you have downs. So a lot of people will shout, you know, I make £2,000 a month. You have good months and you have bad months. On average, I see people making about £700 a month profit from doing this. It's recurring revenue, but it's not passive income. You have to really watch that because it's not as passive as you think it is. It's a business. You have to set it up like a business. You're running a B&B, providing an overnight stay for people. You're providing a high quality product, a high quality place to stay. You need to run that like it's a business, especially when you're talking about multiple units. And the more units that you take on, the more staff you'll need, so your overheads become even more. So you really do need to think, if you're gonna get into rent to rent, don't treat it like some kind of quick passive income opportunity. But let's say you're able to get one deal a month, one rent to rent deal every month for the next 12 months. That means in the first year, at averaging £700 a month per unit, you'd be making £54,600. That's obviously because month 1 you start with 1 unit, month 2 you have 2, month 3 you have 3, and it kind of compounds that way. By the end of the 12 months, say you kept all those units and you carried on for another year, just without adding on any more units, you'd be making about £100,000 in profit, you know, on average, give or take. So that's kind of where you can go with rent to rents. Now, £100,000 recurring revenue sounds amazing, and, you know, and it is. I wouldn't turn my nose up at that. But as I say, it is a business, so you need to be making sure that you run it like a business and not just some quick passive income, get rich quick sort of scheme, which I hear a lot of people talk about and teach. And I don't personally agree with that. It has to be run like a proper business, which is active income. So that £1,000, what does that go on? Mainly, it's actually to go on the contracts if you need it. It's like a management contract or a corporate let agreement, but usually you can get these drawn up pretty cheap, or even find templates online, but just get it checked over by a solicitor. And then the other thing is I'd siphon off a bit of money to spruce up the property. So if there's an apartment and it needs a lick of paint and, you know, it needs a little bit of work doing to it, just to spruce it up and make it a bit more appealing, I'd siphon off a little bit of the money to go on that. But you really don't want to be spending too much, especially if your budget is £1,000. Now, looking at each of these areas, they all can be done with very little money invested. Now, some of them will pay you really quickly. Some of them provide you with a bit more money per transaction. Some provide you with recurring revenue. There's pros and cons, and that's where it comes right back to what I said at the very beginning, which is decide what is your end goal. How do you want your life to look in 10 years' time? Because that will define which strategy or strategies you choose out of the ones that I've just presented to you. Now, I hope you found that video helpful. I actually have a full in-depth training video that I want to offer my audience completely for free. If you are interested in finding high quality deals, what I've done is I've made a video on how I find high quality properties on Rightmove, how I stack those deals for flips and for buy-to-lets. So especially if you're looking at these and you're thinking, do you know what, deal sourcing looks like a really good option for me, then this would definitely be a video that you want to check out. So if you're interested in that training video, click the link in the description, just pass us your email and I'll send through that training video for you to give you that kind of in-depth base knowledge on how to find a really good investment property. But obviously, if you are interested in property in any way, shape or form, then the YouTube algorithm, the almighty YouTube algorithm, seems to think that you would appreciate this video right here. So if that is of interest, click on that link and I'll see you in the next video.